Support for Docs Outside the Box comes from Set for Life Insurance. Set for Life means set for less. Their clients get access to the largest portfolio of discounts and unisex rates available nationwide. Check them out at setforlifeinsurance.com and tell them Dr. Darko sent you.
Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting-edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry. You're getting real live insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
Hey docs, are you looking to learn how to become a physician leader? Then Physician CEO is for you. Physician CEO is an accelerated business immersion program designed for physicians and developed by MBA faculty from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. So learn more at www.physician-ceo.com/DOTB. What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. This is going to be a good one, particularly if you're really interested in personal finance, which I think most of us are, right? But before we get into that, I just want to say that this is actually the 3-year anniversary of when Docs Outside the Box came out. Go to iTunes or Stitch Radio, look at the date, and the dates really coincide. I can't believe it. You know, this literally was a passion project and is now a full-fledged business with the podcast as well as the larger media group between me and my wife. It's something that 3 years ago, I would have laughed in your face if you told me that this is where this podcast is going to go. I literally just wanted to talk to, some of my friends, people on my network who are really successful, and I've just kind of admired them from afar. And I just wanted to learn some tips. I wanted to learn the things that they've been able to do to become very successful in their careers. And the rest is history. I've gone through a lot of changes. Make sure you go and listen to episode 100, where I talk about really the top 3 things that I've learned throughout this entire process, not just from guests, but also just, going through the pains of starting things like an online course or coaching people or just going through the lows and really understanding the process of, cherishing, tasting, enjoying the lows so that when we have a win, you really can understand how sweet that really is. And for all of you creatives out there, for people who are on the fence and not sure or wondering if the podcast space is too crowded or the YouTube space is crowded, whatever space that you want to create in and you want to add your opinion or your artistry or whatever you want to put out there and you're worried that it's too busy, there's always room for more. Trust me, not even from the standpoint of affecting other people's lives, because, that's great to do that. But I think just me looking back, I've learned so much. I've gained so much just from being consistent with the podcast, thinking about the podcast, wondering what you guys would want. Those things have really affected my life in such a positive manner. So I can go on for days about this, but I just want to let you all know, thank you so much for continuing to come back and listen. Thank you so much for subscribing and sharing this with other people. I can't wait to see what's going to happen in the next 3 years. It's going to be a lot different than what we saw in the first 3 years, but I'm really excited about it. Now, on to this episode. So my next guest is the Physician Philosopher, who at the time when I recorded this episode was anonymous. But recently he has come out. His name is Dr. Jimmy Turner, also known as the Physician Philosopher. He's one of my personal favorite physician personal finance blogs. And there's really 4 reasons why I enjoy his. 1, he's really interested in closing the financial literacy gap. That's huge. But also, I like the fact that he really goes into the behaviors behind all of our personal finance decisions. And then he also combines wealth and wellness. I'm a big proponent of what's the big point of becoming the king of the hill in the personal finance realm or, reaching financial independence. But if you can't enjoy that because you have not been paying attention to how you're doing from a mental as well as from a physical standpoint, and you can't enjoy it, was the point of putting all that work. And another thing, too, is I feel like we're spirit animals in this, is that he's learned a lot and he documents his mistakes and how that has made him a lot more smarter within the personal finance realm. So I think that's a really big deal. And I think that helps build credibility. Now, on this show, we're going to talk about, how he became the physician philosopher, the mistakes that he's made, but we're going to learn a little bit about his background. And he's going to talk about his 10% rule and how he allows himself to enjoy life, but still at the same time allows himself to budget and his family to budget and enjoy life and talk about the delicate balance between being a blogger, an anesthesiologist, a father, a husband. This is going to be a really good one. I hope you all enjoy this episode. Please make sure you go ahead and share this with other people. And without further ado, I present the Physician Philosopher, also known as Dr. Jimmy Turner. The Physician Philosopher, welcome to Docs Outside the Box. What's up? What's good?
Going well, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, it's really good to get you on the show. Obviously, you are anonymous like the majority of all the physician bloggers out there. So it's good to see you in a cape and your mask. Where are you calling us from?
Yeah, I guess I say I'm calling you from the South. Probably as specific as I'm going to get.
As nebulous as it is.
That might change, though. We'll see.
I'm a big fan of your blog, and I wanted to bring you on the show to take things a little bit differently, right? Because I think, most physician bloggers, most personal finance blogs, whether you're talking about financial independence or just personal finance and getting, your house in shape, so to speak, I like the approach that you take of it. You take a little bit of a different spin. So let's learn a little bit more about you. Let's talk about why you decided to start the podcast and just some of the philosophy behind the Physician Philosopher.
Yeah, so I blog at the physicianphilosopher.com, and there are a few different things that started this journey. Several of them were mistakes that I experienced or things that I saw happening to me or to others around me. And, I really started diving into the books and the blogs and the podcasts and started talking to my residents and realized that despite all of the wonderful things that are going on in this community, that there was still just this massive financial literacy knowledge gap. I thought that there was a space to help that a little bit. And as you said, put a different spin on it. So my website has a little bit more of a behavioral finance spin to it, helping people realize why this stuff is important. So hopefully they'll get motivated in doing the right things. And also I bring a combination of wealth and wellness. I combine those two topics because I think that financial independence and physician wellness are intrinsically linked. I don't think you can do one without the other. Kind of a introductory piece to what got me going, I guess.
Let's talk more about those mistakes because you're pretty open and honest about that. Do you mind talking about that, opening up a little bit about those mistakes on this podcast?
No, sure. Absolutely. The two biggest mistakes happened when I guess one of them is a mistake and one of them is experience, but they both happened in a 12-month span, the very end of my third year of medical school towards the very end of my fourth year. So when I was on my last week as a third year med student, we had our first kid, and I thought that thanks. Yeah, I've got two more now. Life is busy. But when we had the first one, we thought it was a responsible thing to do to get life insurance so that if I died, my wife and my kid would have something to fall back on. And so when I did that, I met with somebody who was the brother of one of my medical school classmates. And so at the time, I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into this stuff. I knew nothing about it back then. And so it seemed like a pretty trustworthy source. So I talked to him and he said, yeah, we can get you some life insurance. Fortunately, he didn't try to sell me a whole life. I guess he knew I couldn't afford it as a medical student. He probably would have otherwise. But yeah, we can get you term life insurance, but you also need to be thinking about getting disability insurance. And I didn't know a lot back then, but I did know that I didn't have an income. So I said, I don't really know why I need disability insurance. I'm not really protecting any income at this point. After a few conversations, me saying no a few times, he ended up talking me into applying. What happened was that I have an essential tremor. And so I was going into anesthesia, which is one of the hardest specialties to get disability insurance for. Of course, I didn't know this back then. And with that essential tremor, I ended up getting denied by this insurance carrier, which at the time, I didn't realize how big of a deal that would be until I got to my internship in my residency, where they have almost always medical centers, these guaranteed disability insurance policies.
You're right.
And when I met with the guy, he said, no, it's fine. You have medical history. That's not a problem. The only thing is that we need to make sure you haven't been denied from disability insurance before. And I said, well, now that you bring it up, I have. I was denied as a rising fourth year medical student. So to this day, I cannot get personal disability insurance because I applied as a medical student who had no business applying for disability insurance because an insurance salesman was trying to make a commission off of me. Wow. And so you can look at a lot of the writing on my website and see that I spend quite a bit of time trying to prevent those conflicts of interest for my readers and helping them be knowledgeable about where those conflicts exist. And 12 months later, I was sitting in an intern boot camp as a fourth year med student at the very end of the year. And they brought in these financial advising group that specialize supposedly in physician student loans and in physician finance. It felt really slimy. I knew nothing again back then, but it just didn't feel right. So, I didn't end up going with them, but several of my classmates did. 3 or 4 years into my residency, the lawyer who ran this financial advisory group got thrown in jail for fraud.
Really?
Yeah. And the name is GL Advisors if you want to Google it.
Oh, yeah. I could go on a really long tangent about GL Advisors.
Yes, I talked to Renee about it at
Yeah.
FinCon.
Oh, yeah, yeah. For those who are listening who were a part of the Student National Medical Association in the early 2000s, they were a big advisor actually to a lot of people. Now, I had a good experience with them. They helped me refinance my student loans in the correct fashion. Same thing with my wife. And I think a lot of other students, they had them, help them to refinance, because that's what they were doing initially, was just refinancing.
Right.
And then they expanded over the years into what you said, into an advisory group. And to see that the person that we worked with, spent some time in prison, is just like, whoa, shocking.
It was shocking to me too. And I think that those two experiences really opened my eyes up to the fact that it is my responsibility to be as knowledgeable as I can on these topics so you don't get led astray, because those people oftentimes are trying to, put food on the table for themselves. And the way that they do that is through commissions and through conflicts of interest. Mistakes and experiences really, were a big part of what led me to start the website.
So now that you found out that you could not get disability insurance, how did that change your outlook on personal finances? Did you think that because of that now you needed to keep more of a war chest or a treasure chest of like cash on hand? Tell me how you handled it. Because there are people right now who are listening through various reasons who have been denied in the past, or just realize, based off of my conditions, I can't get an affordable disability plan. So what are you doing to kind of mitigate that?
A few things. One is that I stayed in academics, because oftentimes academic insurance policies for group disability can be a little better. That's not always true, but where I am, that is true. And so I knew that, and I still know that my disability insurance will provide a certain amount of income per month should I become disabled. And because of that, my monthly expenses will never exceed that number. It's actually helped in some sense because, I could have inflated my lifestyle, but that wouldn't have been wise. Now, and we'll talk about it later probably.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let's clarify that again. Say that again. You're saying that the amount that you are supposed to get paid out, explain that again so that we can get a better understanding.
Where I work, I end up getting, and I'm very open with, with numbers and stuff like that. But where I work, I basically get $10,000 post-tax per month if I become disabled. And so my monthly expenses, my mortgage, my wife and I do have a couple of car payments still.
But you talk about that.
I'm
talk
open.
about that. I like it. You're open about it. Let's move on.
It's all about balance. Yeah. So, we have those, and then of course, groceries and, dining or any other experiences we have. We pay $1,800 a month of childcare costs. And actually a little more than that if you include after school care, because my wife works full time. All of those expenses, everything combined, utilities, all of it, cannot be more than $10,000 a month. Because I know that if I become disabled, that's all I'm getting. Now, my wife works full time. She does have an income as an educator, but that's not enough to cover what we would need. I made a very intentional decision to limit our lifestyle for that reason and for financially prudent reasons as well. So I would encourage anybody that's in that situation, you cannot inflate your lifestyle above which you will get a disability insurance paycheck if you become disabled.
I love that. I hope the audience is listening because, like I said before, there are a lot of people out there who, whether they've been denied before or are scared to go through the application process, they just feel like they won't get an affordable disability plan. So I think that's a really good idea, or at least one idea that they can use to kind of mitigate that issue. Let's take a step back though. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood, about your experiences as a child that's, I guess, kind of molded your personal finance philosophy. Let's talk more about that because you go into depth about that in your writings.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I guess when I was young, less than 10, my dad was a nuclear engineer. My mom was a stay-at-home. My mom took care of the house and us. I think that we lived probably an upper middle class life. I was a privileged white male and still am. But, during that time, my dad ended up getting basically fired because he was reporting a safety concern at the nuclear power plant. And
he was a whistleblower.
That's exactly right. And so he reported it the way it's supposed to be reported, and they didn't do anything. And he felt like it was a big enough safety concern that no response wasn't acceptable. And so he went above his supervisor's head. It ended up getting fixed, but it also ended up with him losing his job. Now, the backstory is that my dad's disabled. He got shot in a hunting accident 5 years before I was born. And so through that, he's got, a lot of medical problems. He's got atrophied calves and TRPS and all sorts of other stuff. And so when my dad did this.
For the medical students out there, as well as for the pre-med students, can you describe what CRP is?
Yes. So CRPS is chronic regional pain syndrome. It's a chronic pain syndrome that results typically from damage to, nervous structures. So in my dad's case, the bullet hit his spine and I guess adjacent to it. And so it results in atrophied, muscles and skin and weird ability to sweat. It also results in a tremendous amount of pain. And so my dad has been a chronic pain patient since before I was born. But they ended up blaming his firing on his disability, despite the fact that he'd been performing the job for 5 years quite capably. And it just happened to be right after he, blew the whistle. What that resulted in is my parents, who haven't always had the best financial habits. They spent a lot on credit cards and didn't build up savings, didn't have an emergency fund, probably didn't know what one was.
Even as a nuclear engineer, wow.
Yeah, no, I mean, he didn't have any financial training. Every time they would change jobs, they would sell their 401k, take the 10% hit. And I didn't know anything about this stuff when I was 10. So I had nothing to say about it. But what ended up happening was because my parents had bad financial habits, because he got let go, because he got blackballed from the nuclear engineer industry and couldn't get a job, we went into bankruptcy. And so for the better part of a year, we lived with my grandparents. And had my grandparents not let us in, we probably would have been on the streets. We had nothing. We did that for a year. My dad eventually ended up getting a job again. But, that year taught me a lot. Taught me a lot about just perspective, what I have, and to be thankful for what I have, and that you don't need much to be happy. But it also showed me what poor financial planning results in if a catastrophe hits. And so, I learned a lot from that experience and, going through and experiencing what poverty is like, having been in the exact opposite situation the year before.
That's one of the reasons why I really like your site, is because for some odd reason, I feel like your life experiences are kind of similar to my life experiences. You make one mistake, it kind of determines how you look about things in the future and how you handle your personal finance, but then you still make a little bit more mistakes and you're still very honest about it. That's a really impressive story, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thanks.
But let's fast forward a little bit, because now you become a resident, right? You have an opportunity, you become a doctor, you have an opportunity to take care of people, and then you also get access to, I guess, in residency, if it's a 401k or 403b, but you're very honest about that you did not save at all during this time. Let's hear about that also. Another mistake. And now, a word from our sponsor. Understanding how to run a business in medicine will put you at a unique advantage in the future. Whether it's leading a hospital, practice, or starting a new venture, the Physician CEO program will put you in focus from day one. Physician CEO is an accelerated business immersion program developed by MBA faculty from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. The Physician CEO program provides an intensive MBA-style education made up of modules, with each module covering topics from leadership to entrepreneurial ventures. Because of their individualized structure, each participant leaves the program with their 1, 3, and even 5-year business plan, all designed to function in the real world. If you're a physician who is looking to start your own venture, lead your practice or department, or even start planning for succession out of medicine, then you can't afford to miss this opportunity. Class is filling up. Learn more at www.physician-ceo.com/DOTB.
Yeah. So, there are many, which goes to show that you can be just fine and make some mistakes.
Right. But I think that helps you relate with a lot more people though, right? Because like I said, a lot of bloggers out there, they're talking about how perfect their life are, and that's great. But sometimes, there's only so many different ways that you can tell a message, right? There's only unique messengers, right? And your message is very unique in the way how you explain it. And I think that helps you to kind of, develop really strong connection with people. So,
yeah, I appreciate that. I do. I think it's important to be real and to say that life is messy. It's ugly. We make mistakes, but we can get back up from it. I definitely have my share of them, but I didn't really start digging into this stuff until I was probably at the very end of my residency or even during my fellowship. So it's been 2 or 3 years now. So yeah, I had a 403b offered to me in training that I didn't take part of. My wife didn't have a big income, so we could have invested in a Roth IRA and got a tax credit from it. We didn't do either of those things. And on top of that, we actually forbeared on my debt for 5 years. And so, my less than average medical student debt turned into the very average medical student debt quite quickly because I didn't know any better. All I knew is that if I filled out this piece of paperwork, it would go away for a year and I wouldn't have to deal with it.
See, the reason why, your story sounds just like mine. That's exactly how I felt, right?
Yeah.
You just signed the paperwork, you signed a promissory note, whatever it needs to do, get it out of my face for the next year.
Yeah. I mean, the only financial training I had in medical school was they taught me, I didn't know what it was called, the David Bach latte factor. If you buy a latte every day, compounding interest, all that stuff. And that's not to say that it's not important or that's not true, but, I just didn't get a lot of teaching about my debt. Now, it's not fair to me to really talk about this without saying that I also had a lot of help. So, I had a full ride in undergrad, and then I ended up getting a large scholarship in medical school. So I came out with less debt, but I should have been debt free even sooner than I am because I just didn't know how to handle it. And exactly like you said, it was just, and this is how physicians are, right? We're busy. We're taking care of patients. We're learning. We're honing our craft. We want to just do a good job and then go home. And so adding another thing to our plate, like personal finance, just not something a lot of us are interested in. That's why I try to make it as simple as it can possibly be.
When do you think you hit your breakthrough? Like you started like equating what you know and what you know to be the right decisions with actual actions. When did that occur?
Yeah, so my fellowship year, so it 2.5 to 3 years ago, and really started kicking it into high gear and wrote the numbers down, came up with a plan, talked to my wife and discussed the kind of life we wanted to be living and by what time, and then put the pen to paper, or I guess it was technically Excel worksheet, and figured it out. We made the numbers up and we said, hey, we have to save this much to get to our goals by this time, all with a balance on being able to enjoy today at the same time.
Okay, that's a good point you mentioned. Okay, let's attack that first. There's an article that you have in there called The 3 Ways to Financial Independence and How That Can Actually Harm Us. I really enjoyed that one because just like how I said before, like I'm really open about me and my wife's student loan debt issue. Like we got to as high as $662,000 of student loan debt. We did the whole forbearance deferment route. For us, it was just a really pain point because we had to live really far away from home and really close to our families.
Right.
And also at the same time, it actually kind of had the possibility of affecting actually our fertility also, to do IVF treatments and so forth. But we were able to get past that. But it was a painful process for 3 years of doing extra shifts, not saying no anytime an extra shift was given to me, flying away and so forth. So when I saw your blog post, 3 Ways Financial Independence Can Harm Us, it really resonated with me. Do you mind talking more about that and how like being so gung-ho, trying to get that financial independence Shangri-La, how, it could sometimes be your worst nightmare, even though at the end, it's something that we can all benefit from.
Sure. Well, I'm sorry to hear about the experience you went through, Nee.
But you know what, though? Those 3 years were pain. But, I look back and I'm like, hey, it's gone. I got it done, early in my career. So I'm okay with it right now.
Yeah, you grew and you learned. Yeah. So basically, this all came to a head so my wife is an educator. I mentioned that earlier. And she started a full-time job in July that absolutely kicked me square in the teeth. How old's my oldest? So she's 7, about to turn 8 here in a little while. So for 7 years, she'd been part-time, still working, and she's an amazing educator. She's far better at that than I am as a doctor. And she, wanted to go back full time. And I've always supported her. I've always said, you do what you want to do and I'll be there behind you if you need me. And she usually doesn't. But when she started full time, what happened was I was working 1.3 FTE. And so when that happened, I all of a sudden had a ton of more responsibility at home. I'm picking the kids up more often. I'm dropping them off more often. I'm doing the dishes, cooking dinner, doing everything I can to make this transition better for my wife. And still working 1.3 FTE and doing, teaching and research and all this other stuff I was plugged into. So what happened is that as I focused on financial independence and realized that there was this way to, kind of lessen this pain, it also started to magnify the parts of my job that I couldn't stand, because I'd show up and, if I was getting out later than I anticipated by a large margin, then I'd get upset. I had these expectations for one thing and something else would happen. And so, it really did magnify the things that I just didn't want to do anymore. I just want to do the parts of my job that I love. That's not really a choice for me right now. And the other thing it did too is that I'm 10 to 12 years away from financial independence. Like no matter how hard I throw money at this problem, this issue, I'm not going to be there tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so it became very obvious very quickly that this is going to be a long, long tunnel. And I'm in the middle of it. I'm not even in the middle of it. I'm at the beginning. And so it started to affect it made me burn out, honestly. I started realizing that the only thing that fixed it was me being away from work. All of that was magnified by this financial independence slant. And, I've been writing about this stuff for a year now. So I knew what was happening. I knew what was going on. And it's one of the reasons why I always preach balance. And I got to the point where I was not balanced and that just burned me out.
And that was all under your control too. I think once you realize that you're actually the person who's making yourself get burnt out, it really puts a different perspective. And that at least helped me to, change my career, for me to transition into, for me, what I felt was the smarter move, which was for me becoming an independent contractor. It doesn't work for everybody. Everybody's situation is different, but at least helped me out. I'm glad to know that it just seems like we kind of are spirit animals in a lot of ways with personal finance. That's why
Absolutely.
I really enjoy your blog. Let's talk about the 10% rule, because I think it's a really good way for people who are transitioning from becoming fellows or residents, or even just, this is their first time job and not having any money and now having money to kind of prevent that lifestyle creep. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, I think that you can't stick to your goals if you don't enjoy today, but you also need to make goals that are worthwhile and that will get you to where you want to be. And so it's all about this delicate balance between making our heart happy today and doing the financially smart thing. So, I created this rule that I call the 10% rule. And the idea is that your post-tax money, anything that you get that's a raise, a promotion, when you finish training, you start to become an attending. Anytime you have an increase or a bump in pay or windfall money, what you do is you take 10% of it and you can spend it on whatever your heart desires. There's no box around it. You just do what you want.
All right, the Physician Philosopher, let's hear about what you're using it for, because I think it's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. So, and this is an example of how I'm not going to put a box around it because I'm doing something that I would not recommend to anyone else. So I finance.
But it's your 10%, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's my 10%. And we can talk about how I'm getting to my goals too, so that people don't, crucify me. But my 10% was spent on a car. So I got a Chevy SS, which was last year's being made. That cost about $650 a month.
Oof.
And
you got rims on that?
Yeah. I'll take a picture for you sometime.
What kind of rims you got on there for $650?
No, they're stock, but they're pretty sweet.
Okay. All right. Keep going.
Yeah. No, it's one of the sweet things about this car is that it's just loaded, but it's stock. Yeah. So it's a 4-door sedan that's got a stick and a V8 Corvette engine.
Really?
Yeah. And it looks like a Malibu. So I drive by you won't even notice until you can't see me anymore.
Okay. So it's fast and you can fit the kids in there.
3 car seats. Daddy, go faster.
What's the fastest you got in it?
I'm not going to say on the show.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah. So that was one thing. I'm a car guy. And the other thing I spent it on was a country club membership, which provided, pool for me and my wife, my kids, tennis courts. I play golf with my kids. That's how I get quality time in with my oldest daughter in particular. And so that's what I spent it on. And I spent the others, my paycheck went up $10,000. So I spent $1,000 on that. And then I spent $9,000 on paying down my debt and investing. And so in next month, actually, in less than 30 days, I will have paid off $200,000 in 19 months.
Congratulations, yo.
Thanks, man.
Seriously. That is a huge deal. Congratulations, man. That's a big mountain to get past.
Yeah, we're stoked, man. I appreciate it. It's been a uphill battle, but, we made plans and we stuck to them. The great part is that I got to inflate my lifestyle a little bit when I finished training. I feel like I'm living like a king, and having done mission work, I guess maybe that provides a little bit of different perspective, but I've been rich the entire time. And so, being content with where I am is a big part of this. But that 10% rule allowed me to enjoy some of that hard work that I felt like I deserved to, have a little bit of increase in lifestyle, while at the same time really doing the right thing with 90% of my money. It really has been our key to success.
So what's it going to feel like when you finally finish your student loan debt and like that, that line item goes from being debt to like, I don't know, being part of your miscellaneous fund or being part of your savings fund? What's that going to be like? Because that's what happened with us.
Yeah, it's going to be a big deal. I'm a planner, at least financially, maybe not in other areas of my life, but we've got goals and things that we want to do with that extra money, but we're going to start cash flowing an extra $5,500 a month because the additional $4,500 a month came from bonuses using the 10% rule. So that average of $10,000 a month was $5,500 planned plus additional bonus money. And so now we're going to have $5,500 a month to cash flow to get us to financial independence quicker. And naturally, because it's $5,500, we're going to take $500 of that, and my wife gets to spend it on whatever her heart pleases. Sorting through what that's going to look like, I want to just do the right thing. But yeah, it's going to be great because the other thing it will provide is that we don't have a taxable account yet because we've been putting so much money into student loans. And so now we'll finally have some flexibility and a pop-off valve outside of our emergency fund. God forbid something should happen. So having that there as a backup will just provide some additional peace of mind too.
Awesome. I love it. And one thing about your blog that kind of reminds me of a podcast is your Physician Finance interview series, where you are interviewing different doctors in Q&A style and just asking them different questions about their personal finances, the mistakes they've made, the successes that they've had. I actually enjoy it. Like, have you found any type of common theme among all of them?
Probably the 2 biggest common themes are that you can make mistakes, and that's fine. And most people do, and that it really is about just sticking to the plan. So, that interview series, we interview people that are pretty new, they're pretty fresh attendings to people that are nearing retirement. And almost always, these people had a plan that they stuck to. And how they did that was involving themselves in a community. So whether it's, listening to a podcast or joining Facebook groups or, finding blogs that you enjoy and then friends to discuss it with, these people all, surrounded themselves by others that thought like they did and had similar goals. because at work with, speaking statistically, you're not going to find that. Most people at work are not going to know anything about this stuff, are not going to be good at it. And if you bring it up, they're honestly going to feel like you're judging them because, you're going to say, hey, I'm going to be financially independent when I'm 45 and they're 60. So
awkward. Yeah.
It gets awkward fast. So I think that, they had a plan that they stuck to, they made a community, and that most of them made mistakes. Most of them had things that, they could have done better.
So one thing that I really wanted to press upon is, like we're talking about what your life will be like in 10 years, or even just some of the great things that are going on as you go towards that goal of being financially independent. But, I don't like to leave doctors behind. I don't like to leave people behind. So the people who are listening right now, who literally are listening to this podcast while they're looking at bills or, mounds of debt, and they don't know where to start, can you give some concrete advice on how they can start, some first steps that they can take?
Yeah. So I think that the first step is always to sit down and get the big picture right first. And so one tool that I like to use, and my wife and I have gone through, is the Kinder questions. So I have a post on this, 3 Kinder questions. And basically what it does is it walks you through parts of your life that are really going to mean something in the end. And so the first question is essentially, if you were financially independent, if money wasn't a thing, what would your life look like? What would you do every day? What would your passions be? Where would your time be spent? The next question is, and of course, it's all hypothetical and for the physician community a little bit too made up. But you walk in your doctor's office, they give you 5 to 10 years to live. You're not financially independent necessarily. What does your next 5 to 10 years look like? You don't know when you'll die. You do know that you will die. It won't be painful. What would you change that you're not doing right now? And then the last question is, you've got 1 day left to live. You're going to die tomorrow. What would you look back and what would you have wanted to have done? What legacy would you have wanted to leave? And the reason why that's important is because you can't get the small stuff right if the big picture isn't in place. And so the first thing to do is to make the big picture, set it up, and then realize where you're going. You have to have a target. And then the next part is sitting down and looking at those bills and crunching numbers and figuring out, okay, where's my money going? So, everyone uses something different. You can use an Excel spreadsheet. You can use Quicken, Mint. You need a budget. Whatever you need to do, you need to find out how much money is coming in, how much money is being spent, and where's it going. And so after you've done that, you can start to realize, okay, there's this gap, hopefully, between my income and my spending. And then you get to choose what to do with it. And so the debt pay down method that I took was the avalanche method.
Yes, I did the same thing.
Yeah. And so we just, I looked at those student loans. I wanted to crush them. My wife and I made a plan to put an average of $10,000 a month. I wanted these things gone in less than 2 years. And we ended up doing it in 19 months, actually. So that's just
wow.
Yeah, it's a great example of, putting your mind to work. So what that meant is that all my additional money that was outside of my matched 403B money and my wife's 457, she's a governmental 457, any money outside of that additional money went to the loans. And so once those are gone, like we talked about, I'm technically at a fork in the road now. So the avalanche method would say that, well, the next thing I should do is start applying that $5,500 monthly student loan payment that's now gone to my cars and pay down the next debt. That's, the next biggest or the next highest interest rate. We're still in the process of thinking through what that's going to look like and whether we'll do that or not. But big picture first, figure out your income and your spending, where your money is going, and then choose a debt pay down method, the avalanche method or the snowball method, which is Dave Ramsey style, to pay down your debt and get you to your goals. I think that the other key is to make a goal that's actually achievable. So if you don't write down specific goals by specific dates, like $200,000 gone by 1st of July 2019, and then track your progress. And as you see you're making progress, it encourages you to continue to do the right things. And that encouragement is what provides discipline, because otherwise you just get discouraged and then you just stop doing what you're supposed to and, say, hey, I'm never going to get there. So you got to make goals that are attainable and then celebrate them. You have to do something when you accomplish your goals.
I love it. Thank you very much. And that's exactly what me and my wife did. And it helped us pay off our loans instead of in 5 years, but in 3 years. So
that's great, man.
Once again, I feel like we're spirit animals in this. We kind of think alike in very similar fashions with personal finance. Well, let me ask you a question. Since you're talking about goals, what's the goal for the Physician Philosopher for 2019?
So like any blogger, podcaster, I've got number of goals in terms of, number of page views or email subscribers, stuff like that. But really the big goal is I have a book coming out in probably, February or March. And so the big goal is getting that published in the first, few months of the year and seeing how that's received. I'm going to basically focus on that for the first little bit. And then other than that, man, I've always felt this way, and maybe I'm just delusional, but I've always thought that if I could just get this message in front of the right crowd, the right group of people, that it would resonate, because there is a need for behavioral finance teaching and balance, and that, ability to find our accomplishing goals and enjoying today. And so, while we prevent and treat burnout, kind of more of the same in terms of writing 3 posts a week. I'll probably start focusing, on making an e-course at some point for residents and fellows that are just finishing training.
We're waiting for it. There's a need for it.
Yeah. And so I'll probably do that. But yeah, those are the highlights.
I love it. I love it. Well, look, we're getting towards the end of the interview. Let's do some fast fire questions. I ask you a question. You tell me what comes off the top of the dome piece. You ready?
Sure.
All right. So knowing what you know now, what kind of advice would you have given yourself as a pre-med?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give myself is just to be prepared. And honestly, what I mean by that is I'm really big on teaching people about self-identity. And so, I think it is crucial to your wellness as a human being to not lose your identity in your job. I would have encouraged myself to not let being a medical student or a resident or an attending physician define me, and to, not place as big of an importance in those things, because ultimately that is not what defines us. We are so much more than that. I would probably encourage myself to do that and encourage my friends to do the same.
Definitely worth a slow clap. I love it. I love it. I love it. What's a personal habit that you are using that has helped you to be either more successful or just a doc outside the box?
I recently started to cut my emails down. So what I did was I no longer push my emails to my phone.
Really?
Yeah. So what I do is I set it to every 12 hours. It helps me be more efficient and more engaged in whatever I'm doing. And then it also helps me make things a better priority. I'm not the best at staying off my phone when I'm around my wife or my kids. I need to be better about that. And so that's one step in the right direction of not being glued to a screen constantly and actually interacting with the human in front of me. I no longer push every email to my phone instantaneously. It comes every 12 hours and I'll get to it when I get to it, and I've set that expectation. So
I think I'm going to actually include that and incorporate that in my life. I love that. That's a really, really good point.
You'll love it.
Wow. Definitely decrease my data, actually. All right. So what's one life hack, one piece of technology that you're using to make your life easier?
Let me think about that. Nothing earth shattering here. I mean, my wife and I, so my wife is old school, loves paper calendars. Mm-hmm. We have a combined calendar now, which after her starting full time has been necessary for survival. So we have a linked calendar that keeps everything on there. And then honestly, having 3 kids, 2 full-time working parents, grocery ordering and picking those things up has been amazing.
Are you doing it online or are you doing it?
Oh, yeah. We do it online after the kids go to bed. And then my wife or I go and pick it up. It's all put together. And I mean, I know that's a first world hack, but gosh, it makes things so much easier.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, give us and this is, it depends on who you are. I've learned to realize this next question. Name a famous figure, someone that you admire, someone that you think is inspirational that you would like to trade places with just for 24 hours.
That's a tough one. Do they have to be alive?
No, they don't have to be alive.
I was a philosophy major in undergrad. There's a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Have you heard of him?
No.
So he was a German theologian, pastor. He was part of the Valkyrie plot to assassinate Hitler.
Well, I've seen the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a real thing. And
Tom Cruise.
Yeah. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer has this really interesting view on ethics. And I would have loved to just maybe not trade places with him, but sat next to him and just learn from the guy, because he really shaped a lot about, what I think and how I view other people, and how he ended up sacrificing his life for people that were marginalized and out on the boundary and didn't have a say, and he came from a position of authority. And so I admire that a lot.
I love it. Now, if you could parse down this interview into one thing, what's the one thing that you want people to learn from this podcast?
One thing. I guess that it's always important to keep perspective, keep the big picture in focus, and to create your goals around that, which means that you will eventually make a life that, balances today, that you love right now, and that you'll also love in the future. And that it is important to not lose yourself in the process, to maintain your identity.
I love it. I love it. Mic drop right there. The Physician Philosopher, I don't know your name, but the Physician Philosopher, I want you to complete this sentence. I'm not just a doc. I'm
gonna flip this on his head, Nee. I've never been just a doc. I'm a God-fearing husband, a father of 3. I'm an author, a blogger, a craft beer lover. I happen to be a physician who practices anesthesia.
Boom. I love it. It's the best answer I've heard so far, man.
I appreciate that.
I love it. I love it, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a great experience. Like I said, I really enjoy your blog because there's something to be said about credibility, right? And in order to develop credibility, you have to kind of go through things that people are going through, and you kind of make it through and say, hey, look, if I can make it through all the mistakes that I have done, and here are all of my mistakes in all of its glory, then you can too. And I really appreciate it about your blog. And I'm a big fan. And tell other people right now, tell the folks who are listening right now how they can, first of all, read your blog and then also get in contact with you. And then also tell them, give them the best blog post to kind of start to learn more about you.
Yeah, so I appreciate the compliment. Thanks. That means a lot to me. So yeah, you can find me at thephysicianphilosopher.com and you can email me. My email is thephysicianphilosopher@gmail.com. I'm happy to help out in any way that I can, provide perspective that I may or may not have. And then in terms of a blog post, the one that defines what my goal is the most on that website is the one where I talk about the road to burnout and how it helped define my journey in blogging. And so it really ties in the entire message that I try to bring on this blog and how I'm trying to prevent these problems before they start. So that's why my target audience is medical students, residents, young attendings, other, young medical professionals. And so that blog post will really help people figure out if what I write is something they're interested in reading.